and I kind of want to go this direction with it. The not right or wrong of color, but that it's a reflection. You aren't choosing the trends, you're reflecting the trends. And one thing we always tell our clients is you just have to give us honest feedback. There's no right or wrong here because it's an emotive, it's almost like a visceral response. You either love it or you don't. And you can't explain why, but there's 100 million reasons that go into why someone does or does not like a color.
Agreed.
Yeah, what would you say to
the
that,
thing.
Sue?
I just think as long as there's a point of view, right? We just have to take that like design thinking and design methodology
Mm,
that designers they just have it in their heads all the time. That's how we're trained. That's how we think. But translating that to a customer and saying, this is why we're recommending it and here's why. And I think that just gives that confidence to say, if
yeah.
you're willing to try something new, you can go in this direction. But if you want to reflect kind of regionalism and where that's at, you can go in this direction. And I think that's
I
what
love
will
that.
make things, again, good for the client, good for designers, good for the manufacturers that are trying to support these businesses.
That makes complete sense. How does that feel to you, Ruth Ann?
It does make a lot of sense. And I think it's important to note that when we first started doing, we actually resisted doing a color of the year for many, many years because we said you can't pigeonhole that many
Yeah,
people
too
into one
tough.
color. Yeah.
Yes,
So
it's hard.
it's the complete palette. And I know Sue's team does a great job with their forecast. So it's not just about the one color, but when you're doing desk sides with media, they say, okay, that's great, just give us one color. So
Right.
that's how we kind of caved and started doing a color of the year. And it's been interesting to watch how do I say, the personality of the color of the year. Because it started with, oh, this is exciting. Then it kind of turned into everyone's doing a color of the year. Now I'm seeing more people like ask what it is because they're painting something. And we like to look at the color of the year as just a conversation starter. It's just an overview of how we're
I like
feeling.
that.
It's great if you want to use that color, but I will say with some of our colors of the year, while they were beautiful, they weren't applicable in every situation. So I've had some
Love the
projects I've had,
honesty.
and
Love
but it,
that.
like I said, it's not for everything. And I've
Sure.
had some opportunities where I had to say, I appreciate that, but we're not going to use it on this project because it doesn't make sense on that. Maybe we'll use
Yeah.
a bit of it over here. But it has been interesting to watch just the perception of color of the year and how it's changed over the years. And I think Sue would agree with me. We think it's great if you want to paint your house color of the year every year. We'll get you paint every year, but
Yeah.
it's more just tapping in, especially for a designer resource, to say this is where we're going. So I work a lot with builders, and they rely heavily
Mm.
on us for color direction. And so just having that, okay, we're shifting from warm, we're moving away from the cools and the grays and going here. Just having that information is what they look for. Now, do we have to finite it down to the specific color of the year? Not in most cases. But
Yeah.
there's just different ways to look at it and different reasons behind it.
I like what you said, though. It's almost like color of the year is a guiding light. It's not intended to be used because as I'm sitting here and I'm toggling back in my head as you're both talking, and I'm like, I think wasn't Urbane Bronze a color of the year a while back, Sue, for you
Yeah.
guys? It took
Yeah.
me, and now I love that color, especially for more tired properties where like maybe a tricorn black isn't going to do it, right?
Right.
And it took me a couple years to get on board. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I vaguely recall, I think this was a color of the year. And some of that I'm sure is
Yeah.
just delay and market delay. But that's a huge relief to hear from you guys that we don't have to use that color. It's just meant to be a beacon of this is what is going on out here. And what I love about sitting here at this roundtable and having this conversation is realizing how much more is going on beyond just this simplified sound bite, for lack of a better term, that is color of the year.
Yeah.
I want to talk about gray. You
Sure.
alluded to it,
Do we have
Ruthanne.
to? Do we have
I
to?
know that's why I want to talk about it because I have this like innate need to be validated that we are finally done with gray. I feel like gray, once again, we're talking about market indicators, leading color of the year. We all know gray was really born out of the '08 recession, right? Like
Yep.
08
Yeah.
recession,
That's
everything
exactly
came gray.
what.
I mean, heaven help, it was floors, walls, ceilings. I mean, it was ombre gray everywhere. Are we
Yes.
done with it? Somebody please tell me we're
We
done with it.
I'm going to say yes.
So Yeah,
Yes.
I would say that. But I would say
Oh, we're
this.
2 for 2.
I am, don't get too excited,
But
Katie.
there's a
I
caveat.
just, I did, I
Sue,
am,
just
I
let's just leave
am.
it there. Let's just leave
Yeah,
it
We,
I was happy with the period,
we,
so we didn't have
right.
to put in the comma.
so upward is a teeny tiny nod to a little bit of what's coming out of Europe in that it's like a
Ooh,
silvery lightness, like a metallic. And I think it's an
ooh,
indicator of where maybe hardware and lighting trends are going to start to shift. So we've seen this darkness, we've seen black, we've seen gold, and it's natural after 5 or 6 years of that cycle to start to see a balance point. And
sure.
so a silvery metallic maybe is going to start climbing back in. But I just would say this, it's an inflection point. It is a
Mm,
balance. It's not going to become what gray was from 2010 to 2020. That is done. It is warmth. There is too much natural wood in all of our like furnishings and
Mhm.
all the things that we're designing with both commercially and residential to go totally gray. I just think that's like we're far, it may happen in 5 years, but for now we're good.
I think
I
that's a
would
great perspective,
agree.
Ruth Ann. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree. And we've been in the grayish phase for the
Hmm.
past few
Hmm.
years. And but
Hmm.
again, it's I don't want to say regional, but if you haven't built a home or remodeled in the past 6 or 7 years, you start doing research. And what's the hottest colors? Well, you're going to see all these articles on gray because they're not linked chronologically. And so that's a
Yep.
conversation I have a lot, especially if it's commercial properties. And you have to say, yeah, it was very popular, but that article is 8 years old. So, and I'm gonna put this on record and say this. I'm gonna say the B word. We are moving. We're going to beige, whether whether
Yep.
we're
Yep.
and I see your face, whether excited about that or not. But I
Yeah.
always, I tell people we were just talking about this last night at an industry event. It's not going to be the beige we had in the 80s. It's with the sea
No, the graham
foams and the
cracker where
moss.
it literally looked like
Right.
you mashed up a graham cracker and glued it to your
Oh,
wall. Yeah,
oh,
we've all
you
Totally.
been
didn't have
there.
to say. Now I have a
Yes.
visual in my head I didn't need. Thank you,
I'm
Katie.
so sorry, Ruth Ann.
But coming back, and a lot of that beige is more that taupe with the red undertones. I think this is
Yeah.
going to be more neutral beige, and we're going to
Yeah.
see it with the blue. The blues aren't going anywhere, especially
No.
those muted kind of smoky ones. That's beautiful with beige, with some white trim, maybe a deep urbane bronze or an onyx sort of anchor it. That's the
Yeah.
fresh looking palette. So it's a color we had from the past, but used differently. So it's a conversation
Mm,
I've been having for 3 or 4 years. I think those who specify color, we can all speak to this. We were done with gray 7 or 8 years ago. It's just you're
preach.
inundated
Completely.
with it.
Oh, preach.
Yes,
Yes.
it took a
It
while
was
Yes.
for it to
so
trickle
intense
down.
for so long that I'm just,
It
Oh
was
I have
man.
kind of a gag reflex about it now.
depressing. Same. And what's sad is, now it looks dated and you think of,
It
all
does.
these bigger projects. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, it's just a big national chain saying, please don't use gray. And again, from a paint company, all right, let's paint it gray because we're going to be changing it in 3 years. But
Yeah.
we don't want to do that to them. So, but my indicator was, aside from everything else we've been seeing, I had a rep 2 weeks ago who was like, "There's no way grays or beige is coming back," and I got a text from him saying, "Okay, what's our truest beige?" And I thought it
Yeah.
has
Completely.
like we're
It
because
it
his
does.
customer was
If we
It
asking
does.
converted
for it.
him, the
So,
market has
yep.
shifted.
And he's
Well,
like,
and I
he said,
think
Yep.
"I will never doubt you again."
yeah, you know what you're doing. This is a good thing. No, and I think to the intensity level, some of those grays
Mm.
got super deep. We got into charcoals and we got into, but I feel like everything is throttling up, kind of what you mentioned, Sue, almost like a metallic blue. And back to Ruthanne's word of just kind of a dusty, but it's getting so, I feel like we had such stark contrasts of white on gray and black and almost that farmhouse motif for a while. And I
Yeah.
feel like everything is just calming down to a softer
Yep.
palette where we're going to have these more sophisticated tones and more warmth, to your point, Sue, about furniture and the wood tones that we're seeing, which gets us back to the beige, Ruthanne. I absolutely. It's going to
I
be
think
interesting
it's
to see how it all melts together.
Katie, I think it's going to be so we'll go like a little macro here and socio-political.
Yeah,
Interest rates are high,
please
the
do.
world's on fire, all these
Yep.
crazy inputs are coming in. And so there'll be high highs and low lows. So that high stark contrast is probably going to continue because we are living in sort of this black and white space. If it's not one thing, it's the
Interesting.
other. So that may
Yep.
that those like that contrast may stick around. I think what we're just going to see is people that are exhausted by that will move towards this like natural, much more refined, soothing, like all the buzzwords that we love
Uh,
when describing
yep.
color. I think there's going to be one side and then the other. and people will kind of decide
It's
where they fit
exactly
with
like our
it.
political climate right now. There's
A
one
hundred
side and the
percent.
other. It's interesting
Exactly.
the reflection that we're seeing in color to that.
And
And
you're
like, I don't want to,
exactly right.
right.